Hey there, folks. Thanks for joining me tonight. Let's dive into a topic that's got everyone's knickers in a twist. Collectivism. Think of it as a stand-up routine about the delicate balance between individual freedom and the needs of the many. So buckle up, buttercups, because we're about to embark on a wild ride through the world of collectivism. Imagine a seesaw, right? On one end, you've got complete and utter chaos, anarchy, baby. No rules, no government. On the other end, you've got the opposite extreme, total collectivism. Think beehive, ant colony, or that creepy scene in Star Trek where everyone's assimilated into the Borg collective. So where do we find that sweet spot? Where's the balance between individual liberty and the common good? That, my friends, is the million-dollar question we're here to explore. We all want to live good lives, right? It's a no-brainer. How do different levels of collectivism impact our freedom, security, opportunities, and overall well-being? And most importantly, how do we find that elusive balance between individual aspiration and the collective good? All right, let's start at the very beginning, that wild, untamed end of the collectivism meter, anarchy. But here's the catch, you're also completely on your own. No roads, no hospitals, no Netflix. So what happens? We start to band together. We form families, tribes, small communities. This, my friends, is the first step towards collectivism. It's basic human nature. We're social creatures, hardwired to cooperate and build communities. As our communities grow and evolve, so too does our capacity for collectivism. We build roads, establish laws, create institutions. And with each step forward, life seems to get a little bit better. This is the seductive allure of collectivism. It promises progress, prosperity, and security. But here's the danger. It's a slippery slope. We start to see individual freedom as a luxury, something that can be sacrificed in the name of the greater good. Remember that collectivism meter we talked about earlier? Well, as we move further and further to the right, something strange happens. The system that once seemed so beneficial begins to feel oppressive. The government becomes bloated and bureaucratic, interfering in every aspect of our lives. Now, before we all descend into a pit of despair, let's remember that collectivism isn't inherently evil. It's a tool like fire or the internet. It can be used for good or ill, depending on who's wielding it and what their intentions are. Public schools, libraries, parks, these are all examples of collectivism in action. It's about creating a society that's both prosperous and just, where individual ambition and the common good are not seen as mutually exclusive. Section 2, the law of unintended consequences. When collectivism backfires. Even with the best of intentions, collectivism can have unintended consequences. When we try to micromanage every aspect of society, we stifle innovation, creativity, and individual initiative. We create a culture of dependence where people are afraid to take risks or think for themselves, and in the process, we undermine the very foundations of a free and prosperous society. Section 3. The centralization conundrum, why too much of a good thing can hurt. One of the biggest dangers of unchecked collectivism is the tendency towards centralization. Centralization leads to inflexibility, inefficiency, and a disconnect between those in power and the people they're supposed to serve. It creates a breeding ground for corruption and stifles innovation. Section 1, the siren song of more, why we fall for the illusion of endless progress. We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us more is always better. We're told that if we just surrender a little more of our freedom, we can achieve a utopia of safety, security, and endless prosperity. But as we move further down that collectivist path, we start to see our freedoms eroded, our choices limited, our individuality stifled. Imagine that each of us possesses a finite amount of life force, the energy, creativity, and drive that makes us unique individuals. Every time the government expands its reach, it siphons off a little bit of that life force. Over time, the cumulative effect can be devastating. We become less willing to take risks, less likely to challenge the status quo, less interested in pursuing our own individual paths. Here's a fun thought experiment for you. Imagine trying to design a computer program that could perfectly predict and control the behavior of a single human being. Now, imagine trying to do that for an entire society, millions, even billions of individuals, each with their own unique desires, motivations, and quirks. The more we try to centralize control, the more likely we are to create unintended consequences, stifle innovation, and ultimately undermine the very foundations of a free and prosperous society. All right, folks, let's get real for a minute. How do those in power convince us to happily hand over our precious life force? They resort to a much more subtle and insidious tactic ideology. They distract you with flashy promises and grand narratives, all the while subtly picking your pocket of your critical thinking skills. Religion, the original opioid of the masses. I'm not here to bash religion. Faith provides comfort, community, and moral guidance, but it can be misused as a tool of control and oppression. Religions promise rewards and punishments, often in the afterlife. Imagine a ruler using religion to control subjects. Questioning authority becomes a sin. Disobedience is a crime against both state and God. But religion isn't the only tool in the collectivists' arsenal. Oh no, my friends, they've got a whole toolbox of ideologies. And one of their favorites, patriotism. There's nothing inherently wrong with loving your country. But when that love is weaponized, it silences dissent and justifies the unjustifiable. Critics are branded traitors, enemies of the people, and it's not just patriotism. The collectivist toolbox is full of other isms waiting to be exploited. They can justify censorship, oppression, even violence. Remember those tribal instincts we talked about earlier? That deep, primal urge to band together with those who are like us and view those who are different with suspicion, even hostility. Well, collectivist ideologies exploit those instincts masterfully, and they draw a line in the sand separating us, the good, the righteous, the true believers from them, the outsiders, the heretics, the enemies of the state. And just like that, the complexities of the world are reduced to a simple binary. You're either with us or against us. This us versus them mentality is incredibly effective at silencing dissent. After all, who wants to be on the side of the bad guys? Who wants to be accused of betraying their country, their religion, their tribe? So we self-censor. We stifle our doubts, suppress our critical thinking skills, and go along with the crowd. We convince ourselves that the ends justify the means, that a little bit of oppression is a small price to pay for the greater good. Silencing dissent in the name of harmony. It's a slippery slope to censorship. We ban books, censor websites, shut down dissenting voices on social media. We tell ourselves it's for the greater good, protecting people from harmful misinformation. But censorship is like a virus. It spreads quickly, infecting society. Soon it's not just extremist views, but any form of criticism. And in the process, we create a chilling effect on free speech. People become afraid to speak their minds. Without free exchange of ideas, society stagnates. The price of conformity. When individuality becomes the enemy. In a collectivist society, conformity is prized and individuality is viewed with suspicion. After all, if everyone is marching in lockstep, then anyone who steps out of line is a potential threat to the order and stability of the group. So we learn to blend in, to suppress our unique quirks and passions, to become good little cogs in the collective machine. We trade our individuality for a sense of belonging, our freedom of thought for the comfort of conformity. But here's the thing, a society that values conformity above all else is a society that's destined for mediocrity. It's a society that stifles creativity, innovation, and progress. It's a society that's ripe for exploitation by those in power. Because when we're all too afraid to think for ourselves, to question authority, to challenge the status quo, then those in power can do whatever they want. They can exploit us, control us, even destroy us, all in the name of the greater good. The road to ruin. Collectivism's inevitable end game. Let's be crystal clear. When collectivism goes unchecked, when those in power amass enough control, the road inevitably leads to a dark and desolate place. It's a destination paved with good intentions, sure, but the end result is always the same. A suffocating dystopia, where individual freedom is crushed beneath the iron heel of the collective. Think about it. If your entire ideology is built on the idea that the individual must be subservient to the group, that any dissent is a threat to the greater good, then how do you deal with those pesky individuals who refuse to conform, those who dare to question your authority, who cling to their individuality, who insist on thinking for themselves? The answer, my friends, is as old as time. You silence them, you eliminate them, you make them disappear. The iron fist in the velvet glove. From subtle control to brute force, it often starts subtly. A whisper campaign, a smear campaign, a social media mob. Those who dare to dissent are labeled as enemies of the people, traitors, heretics. They're ostracized, ridiculed, silenced. But as the collectivist ideology tightens its grip, the methods become more overt, more brutal. Censorship becomes commonplace. Free speech is suppressed, dissent is criminalized, and then come the camps, the prisons, the killing fields. Those who refuse to conform, those who cling to their individuality, those who pose a threat to the collective are rounded up, imprisoned, executed. It's a story that's been repeated throughout history, from the gulags of the Soviet Union to the killing fields of Cambodia, from the Cultural Revolution in China to the reign of terror during the French Revolution. Section 3, the color of oppression, why no ideology is immune to corruption. Here's the thing about collectivism. It doesn't really matter what flavor you prefer. It can be wrapped in the flag of patriotism, cloaked in the robes of religion, disguised as the pursuit of social justice, or sold as the only path to environmental salvation. But the end result is always the same: the suppression of individual freedom and the rise of an oppressive, totalitarian state. Section 1. Finding the tightrope, the delicate dance between individual and collective. So where does all this leave us? Teetering on the precipice of despair, convinced that humanity is doomed to swing back and forth between the extremes of anarchy and tyranny? Not necessarily. Remember that sweet spot we talked about, that delicate balance between individual freedom and the collective good? It exists, my friends, but finding it, maintaining it, that's the real challenge. It's a tightrope walk, a constant negotiation between our selfish desires and our responsibility to the larger community. It's about recognizing that while individual freedom is essential, it's not absolute. There are times when we need to make sacrifices for the greater good, when we need to come together to solve problems that we can't address alone. But those sacrifices should never come at the cost of our fundamental freedoms. They should never be made under duress, under threat of punishment, or under the intoxicating spell of a seductive ideology. Section 2, the price of apathy, why we must remain vigilant guardians of our freedoms. The greatest danger we face isn't some external threat, some evil empire hell-bent on world domination. It's our own apathy, our own willingness to trade our freedom for the illusion of security, for the promise of a better tomorrow that never quite seems to arrive. Because here's the thing, freedom isn't a gift. It's not something that's handed down from on high or guaranteed by some dusty document. Freedom is a muscle. It needs to be exercised, defended, fought for every single day. The moment we become complacent, the moment we start taking our freedoms for granted, that's the moment we start to lose them. It starts subtly, almost imperceptibly. A new law here, a new regulation there. We barely even notice it happening, until one day we wake up and realize that the bars have been erected, the cage has been locked, and we're trapped. A call to think, to question, to never stop fighting for freedom. So what's the answer? How do we navigate this complex landscape and preserve our freedoms? Think for yourself, question everything, demand evidence, seek out alternative perspectives. Don't be afraid to speak out, challenge the status quo. The future is something we create. Choose freedom.